to the Let's Talk series. I'm Jude Pemell, and I'll be bringing you some personal development talks each Monday night. If you're watching live, we're located in Sydney and it's 7 p.m. And I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I am speaking tonight, which is the land of the Cammeraygal people of the Eora Nation. And I'd like to pay my respects to the elders, past and present, and to their amazing stories and their history. And also to any Aboriginal people who may be watching this at some time. So, welcome. Tonight, I'm going to talk on the topic of addiction. And this is certainly not a new topic. Addiction has been around for a very long time. And when I first had a significant encounter with this subject, I was actually living in America. I was living in Los Angeles. I lived there for 10 years. And during the 80s, this was about it was the early 80s, and a huge social change was happening in America during the 80s. And it was led very much by people who began to emerge in the wake of a kind of tidal wave of addiction. And some leaders in the field began to emerge, and you may have heard of some of these people. In the vanguard, leading the vanguard, was a man called, I've forgotten his name, but it will come to me. Anyway, John Bradshaw. And Alice Miller was another. She came well before John Bradshaw. And so I had began to encounter this subject via the enormous amount of publicity that people like John Bradshaw were getting. He had a television series that played weekly called Bradshaw on the Family. And that was a landmark series in which his background was in the church. He was a preacher, and he was also trained in psychology and psychotherapy and other areas in the field. He's a very clever man, and he wrote a number of books on addiction and codependency. And there were many others, and a lot of them specialised in different kinds of addictions. But it was brought to my attention by John Bradshaw that the World Health Organization had declared 1984. In 1984, they made an announcement saying addiction is the crisis of our time. Addiction was getting a very high profile at that time, and it was a sort of renaissance of the 12-step program, which was the mainstream treatment for addiction at that time, and it is still mainstream treatment. And in America, people who were emerging as leaders in the field, many of them were also trained in the dark arts of mental health and psychology. And that was a joke, by the way, and had worked through their own addictions. And so they were the perfect people to bring enlightenment to all of us. And at the time, I didn't know much theoretically about addiction, but as I became more and more aware through the information that I was exposed to, I started to realise that I had a few addictions myself. And I think his television series, Bradshaw on the Family, was unbelievably popular because people were waking up all over the place. And I think it's important to understand that addiction is very widespread. It is very common. And the stereotyped alcoholic or drug addict does not define addiction. For instance, the vast majority of people who have dependency, alcohol dependency issues are frequently well educated, they have good jobs and families, and they live next door in very nice suburbs, and they drive nice cars and their kids go to nice schools. We're talking mainstream society. Addiction is not relegated to a lower socioeconomic area, strata of society. It is mainstream. And so the stereotypical down and out person living on the street does not define addiction at all. Addiction, there can be an addiction to absolutely anything. It does not need to be a substance at all. For instance, the most common addiction is addiction to other people. There are now, with the growth of the internet and the World Wide Web, there are now a lot of online addictions. And a huge growth in many addictions has been fostered by the cyberspace. For instance, gambling, internet pornography, and just to name a few. So addiction is a very common aspect of our social fabric, and it has what concerned the World Health Organization so much in saying this is the crisis of our time, is that it gnaws at the fabric of society. And it is a condition that is, we would say, is based on spiritual bankruptcy, spiritual and emotional bankruptcy. And this is a condition which, at this time in human history, affects an enormous proportion, if not most, people in our society, regardless of cultural background, race, etc. And whilst what I was being exposed to in the 80s was very much a middle-class white problem, we would say it is not exclusively white or middle class, it is much more widespread. So when we talk about addiction, we can talk about all kinds of things that people can become addicted to. So there are the obvious things like drugs and alcohol. There's work. There's making money, amassing money for fear of not having enough. There's food. Check out what goes in your shopping trolley every week. How much of it meets the needs for your family's basic nutritional needs, and how much of it doesn't. I know, I look at what's in people's shopping carts in the supermarket and I'm just gobsmacked at the hundreds and hundreds of dollars they'll spend on their weekly shop on stuff that is not going to meet their basic nutritional needs. So how does it begin? How does addiction begin? Well, in my experience, there's a couple of ways. And the way that most of us will relate to is that at some point, often during our mid-teens or perhaps earlier, there'll be some experimentation with, smoking dope, alcohol, whatever it is. There'll be some experimentation, and that turns into social use. Once we are old enough to start going to parties and more adult type functions, of course, there's going to be alcohol and other things around. And so I'm going to talk about the most usual scenario, but of course there are scenarios that differ widely from this, is that during those teen and late teen, early 20s, that social use is very common. And there's a kind of autonomic learning process that goes on during those years. And, from 1 or 2 drinks, once a week, maybe 3 drinks, that will grow to maybe 4 or 5 or more, and will become more frequent than that kind of Friday night, Saturday night party. Once a person begins working, they have income, they have more money that they can spend on the things they want to spend it on, and that may involve, going to bars and pubs and clubs and so on. And the pathway to addiction will begin here at the social use. A person where one person may pursue social use quite extensively, their autonomic learning is programming them that a drink or a smoke or whatever it is equals feeling good, feeling more confident in social arenas, finding it much easier to talk and have conversations. The dopamine effect of these feel-good things is that the receptors in the brain get flooded with brain chemicals that, like dopamine and serotonin, that give us a high. And it's like there's one drink, feeling pretty good, the tongue loosens up, then another drink, feel even better, even happier, have another drink, have another drink, have another drink. And, end up possibly in an embarrassing situation of falling off your bar stool, falling on the floor, throwing up all over the bathroom floor, whatever it is. But the next day, I wouldn't remember that. I just remember what a fabulous time I had. I don't remember how embarrassing I looked, what rubbish I talked repeatedly. I don't remember my voice getting so loud that I was screaming at people and they were screaming at me, because something happens to my hearing when I drink. All I remember is what a fantastic time I had. And so here's where the kind of programming that this autonomic learning sets up starts to control my behaviour. And over time, if I keep drinking more and more, and whatever it is, the drugs, whatever it is, whatever that substance is, or whatever that practice is, I might be working long hours. I might be exercising a lot. I might be doing a lot of sport. It may involve food. It can involve absolutely anything. But I will start chasing the high because it's a euphoric experience. And so I chase the high more and more. And usually, for the first years, however many, I will wake up the next morning, maybe with a bit of a hangover and a thick head, but I feel pretty good. But over time, if I don't pull back, if I go down that pathway, what will happen is that the hangovers will get more fierce. And I will be wondering how on earth I got home last night, because I cannot remember driving. I cannot remember parking the car. I might have a huge swelling on my head. I don't know how it got there. I might have some bruises. I have no idea how they got there. And this starts to eat away at me. And then maybe, because I've spent so much money on whatever it was, I'm having trouble finding enough money to buy food or pay the rent or buy the kids' shoes or whatever it is. And so that high that I used to feel even the next morning starts to slide into a more painful area. And because addiction is all about feelings, and what drives addiction is feelings. And so this process of becoming addicted that my own brain is programming me for continues. So because I'm waking up in the morning not being able to remember how the hell I got home or who I slept with, or how these bruises have come to appear on my forehead, instead of stopping there and then, which, let's face it, would make a hell of a lot of sense. Maybe I check the bank account and think, oh my God, I withdrew $300 last night. That's an awful lot of money for a couple of drinks. So, you know, a sensible person would say, that's enough, I'm not going to do this. But the person who's pursuing addiction, will they do that? No way. They will keep going until, and moving further and further into the painful feelings. And so the euphoria, the highs will really start dropping off. And so the person is doing more and more, whatever it is, drinking, drugging, exercising, whatever it is, doing more and more of it to chase that high, that wonderful euphoria. And over time, it will become like, you know, the good times of drinking. It's a memory. And so those earlier days are the good times. And although I can remember them quite well, it doesn't occur to me that I'm not having a very good time now. And maybe I'm getting into trouble at work for being late or for not showing up. Maybe I'm lying to the boss and saying, you know, I've got malaria when I've just got a hangover. And so I'm not showing up where I should be showing up. And so I start to go downhill. But do I see this and stop? No. I continue. And so I go more deeply into the addiction, and the pleasure factor reduces and reduces, and the pain factor increases and increases over time. But will that stop me? No. So I'm moving from social use. I've moved into I've moved through heavy use, and I'm in problem use of whatever it is. And, you know, I could stop at any time, but I don't. It doesn't even occur to me. And so in the problem phase, it gets worse, to the point that eventually I am using just to function. There is no more high. It's gone. The receptors in my brain are so depleted, and so that use first thing in the morning clicks in. And then it becomes something that I'm doing during the day. It will interfere with everything, and all of my choices, my life choices, will be around the addictive substance or process. Do I want to go to a school night with my kids? No, because it'll be dry. There won't be, I won't be able to drink. I won't be able to do what I want to do. Weekends with a family. No, I'd rather go and be with drinking with my buddies, or gambling, or at the races, or whatever it is. I'd rather be doing that. And so life choice, I defer life choice to the addiction. And over time, this becomes worse and worse. And so I will start copping a lot of criticism and flack from my family, who are genuinely very, very concerned about what is happening to me. They can see it, you know, a 3-year-old can see it, but can I see it? No way. And so I progress from problem use into acute addiction, into the acute stage of addiction, where I am immersed. And then I don't care about work, I don't care about this, I don't care about my family, because I'd rather have the addiction, I'd rather have the drink, the drugs. I'd rather be down at the club gambling, I'd rather be whatever it is, and I will start losing everything. My family, my job, my home, my income. It's very, very serious. I could be on the street. But does it occur to me to stop? No. And this is how addiction takes over myself. I completely compromised every aspect of my life and my being for the addiction. Now, that doesn't happen overnight normally. But then again, you know, with some people, it is, you know, I would say for most people to get to that deeply lost in addiction, for a person to become completely lost in addiction and to lose themselves so totally, you know, it's like digging yourself into a deeper and deeper and deeper hole every single day, until one day, guess what? I can't see out of the hole. And that moment is pretty terrifying. And at that point, a person who's, by the way, there are two pillars of addiction, and we call them denial and rationalization. And they operate together in our psyche. We rationalize everything we're doing, we justify and deny. We deny that it's having an effect on my life. I deny what's really happening, what I'm really doing. I deny that I have an addiction. You know, I've honestly worked with people who would go and drink 30 schooners a night and say to me, oh yeah, I just have a couple of drinks. But when you unpack that, it's absolutely monumental. And so this is the, you know, the minimizing, etc. And so when a person has dug themselves into such a deep hole that one day they realize they cannot see out, and the terror that can go with that can be the turning point, because that person may at that point decide that they have found their rock bottom and that they cannot sink any lower. And it is at that point that they may reach out for help. They may pick up their phone and call a helpline. They may go somewhere, walk in the door at a hospital, or go to their doctor, or talk to somebody and reach out for help. And that is a very, very important point, because it's really important that they take that initiative. Only they can do it. Doesn't matter how much we love our kids or our brothers or sisters or our partner or even a parent or a really, really close friend. And we've watched them destroying themselves. It's terrible to watch that happen. But we can never, ever make that choice for them. We can never get them to that point. They have to get themselves to that point, and they have to make their own decision, and they have to take the initiative themselves. And so often I've seen parents who are devastated and frustrated and grieving because they've watched their kid go through a long process of self-destruction. It is very painful to watch a loved one doing this. It is very painful to do this to yourself, except when you're using, it numbs the pain. But the people around you are not getting numbed, and they are carrying immense pain. And so at this point, the person may reach out for help, or they may overdose. They may see what a terrible situation they've got themselves into, have that moment of realisation and can't face it, so they take an overdose, and that overdose may also get them into treatment if they end up in hospital, or some other sort of institution or person that can provide that help or refer them for help. And so that is a very important turning point. And that need needs to be met, and it needs to be met appropriately. Really, there is nothing worse than a person who's asking for help and is ready to be helped and is turned away. They are turned away, or they are treated in a way, and this does happen in our institutions, that a person can be treated in quite a damaging way at that point, and not offered the kind of help that they need, in which case they'll just go back and use more often than not. And so there needs to be, I think, great awareness in our society around addiction, and what to do when a person is ready to be helped. At the very least, we can take them to their family, to the family doctor, who will have at least a reasonable idea of where to refer them, if not a very good idea. GPs are often the first port of call. There are hotlines. Oh, excuse me. There are hotlines that you can look up straight away on your phone or online. The resources are very easy to access, and a community centre is an absolute wellspring of help in these situations, because they have all the information. So once the person can show up and understand that they can't help themselves, this is a very, very important place for them to reach. And so I want to move on from that overall picture now to what we call the addiction cycle. And it's important to understand what drives addiction. Because what drives addiction is feelings. We are feeling beings. We have a huge range of emotions. We have a full range of emotions, and we feel them. Even if we've learned to repress our feelings and have been doing a good job of repressing them for much of our life, we are still feeling them subconsciously. They are there. And we are emotionally driven beings. Emotions drive our behaviour. And addiction is behaviour. And so I'm just going to share my screen with you. Oops, wrong screen. There we go. So I hope you can see that. So this is, I hope you can see that well enough to read. This is what we call the addiction cycle. And so recovery from addiction depends on our efforts to separate addiction from living problems, making sobriety a top priority. Many dependent people think that their problems will be solved if they can win the big prize, lose the weight, drink, drug, eat, exercise, or work themselves into a state of oblivion or euphoria. And this is all in an attempt to fill the growing void inside that nothing physical can actually fill. All addictions begin and end with spiritual bankruptcy. So the worse I feel in spiritual bankruptcy, the bigger the reason to set myself up to go and use. This is the obsessional phase. I then act on the obsession, and that's the compulsion phase. And this is how the addict creates a belief system that poses an unreal causal connection between problems and gambling or picking up the activity or the substance to which they are addicted. And so I'm just going to have a bit of a look at the addiction cycle. So the obsession phase is actually the cognitive phase, or how we think. And I'm not saying it begins with a thought, because this is a cycle that happens. So there are setups, and there are projections, there are excuses, there's denial, there's what we call the using self-talk, rationalizations, justifying, comparing and blaming. And that might be like, I really feel like having a few drinks, but people are giving me a bit of a hard time lately. But the fact is, you know, Jim, who lives next door to me, he's actually got a much worse problem than me. You should see how, you know, what he was like when he came home last night. I saw him leave the pub. You know, he was absolutely off his face. And I don't have a problem. I'm not nearly as bad as him. And, you know, the fact is I've had a really tough day at work and I just need to calm myself down. I deserve this. I've worked hard all week. I have worked hard all week. I deserve a drink. And if the boss, I wouldn't need to drink if the boss didn't give me such a hard time, complaining about me all the time, or, you know, my partner is at me all the time. You know, I just want some peace. And that's, you know, so I need a drink. And so there's no end of excuses and justifications. And I deny that I have a problem. Well, of course I don't have a problem. I can hold my grog, or I can, you know, I don't have a problem. I don't have a drinking problem. I've never missed a day off work. You know, I get up every morning and go to work. So don't you tell me I have got a problem. And so gambling calms me down. I gamble because I'm bored. How many people have I heard say, I drink because I'm bored, or I do this because I'm so bored. I gamble because I'm so bored. And so we come over here to the compulsion, the action. So there's a loss of control, and then I get on. I go and use. And that might go on for a few hours or a few days or a few weeks or a few months. I might be a binge, whatever. And of course, there's always consequences. And loss of control always carries consequences. So my behaviour, for starters, is antisocial. There's a loss of family, friends, job, home, money, assets, security, self-esteem, stability, loss of mental health. There might be suicide attempts, hospitalizations, institutions, accidents, violence, overdoses. I could kill, you know, I could die from what I'm doing to myself. And, you know, and I'll say to myself, well, I only meant to gamble $30, but, you know, hey, I planned to only have one drink, you know. I went to the pub and I was only going to have one drink, and 3 days later, I didn't mean to eat the whole cake, the whole pie. You know, I just ate the whole thing, and then I went for something else, and I'll never do it again. Then the shame sets in, the guilt, the bad feelings, the self-recrimination. And now I'm going down here into the feelings associated with spiritual and emotional bankruptcy. And so we have shame, self-deprecation, tremendous guilt, fear, futility, rage, loneliness, depression, despair and torment, self-hatred, lostness. Addiction is terribly isolating, terribly, terribly isolating. And so I feel lonely, I feel very isolated and alone, I feel burned out, paranoid, disgusted with myself, voided, strung out, and just the ever-present underlying guilt and self-hatred for what I'm doing. And why is that? Because I am constantly acting against my own value system. The value system of an addict is as high as anybody else's. And this is one of the huge casualties. It's a huge loss in addiction, is that I forsake it all the time. And that deeply rooted sense of shame and guilt and self-hatred and despair, it gets into my DNA. Just think what a terrible person I am doing this. I may never admit it, but deep inside, I know. And there will always be those moments when I'm coming down, or when I'm really hungover, when I'm getting clean. These feelings will come up and they will feel absolutely overwhelming. So what do? I go back into the obsession phase. And then I act out again. I get on, I use, and then I'm back into the spiritual and emotional bankruptcy again, feeling even worse, because every time I go through this cycle, I come out feeling worse and worse and worse. And the worse I feel in spiritual and emotional bankruptcy, then the more reason I have to go and do exactly the same thing again and again and again. And so you see what a vicious cycle this whole addictive system really is, and how it takes over a person gradually until eventually they cannot see the light anymore. They're completely in the dark. And how do we break this cycle of addiction? How do we do that? And this is, of course, the million-dollar question. If there was an easy answer, I would be a millionaire. And so would a lot of other people. If there was an easy answer, we wouldn't be talking about the crisis of our time. We wouldn't be talking about something that just destroys the fabric of our society and that is connected to so much violence and domestic violence, homelessness, poverty, mental health. It's connected to so many other issues. Okay, so how do we break the cycle? Well, the first step is that I must reach out. I must realise that I am powerless over the addiction and that I need help. When I admit that to myself, I then need to admit it to somebody else. It may be my GP, it may be my friend, it may be someone I talk to on the other end of a helpline who is in a position to help me. And I then need to get help. And I'm talking about structured help that may involve going into a detox or going to a 12-step meeting, going to some other kind of program where I can get clean and go into some kind of structured rehabilitation program. I want to make it very clear that simply putting down the substance or the practice of addiction that I have, whether it's work, whatever it is, just putting that down does not equate with recovery, even at the smallest level. A person can put down alcohol, drugs, or whatever it is, and continue to be as crazy and as off the planet, behaviourally, mentally and emotionally, as they were when they were drinking or using or gambling or whatever. Because the disease of addiction, some people will hate me for calling it a disease, I see it as a disease, as a spiritual dis-ease associated with spiritual bankruptcy. And so this has to be addressed. It has to be addressed. And so in taking these first 3 steps of admitting I have a problem to myself and then to somebody else, and of getting substantial active help for myself, because I cannot help myself. I can reach out, but I cannot help myself. I need people who know what they're doing, how to help me, who are professionals, who are trained, who are in a position to give me the right kind of guidance and assistance that I need. My family are not those people. My best buddy is not that person. My mum and dad, my partner, they are not that person. I need to be talking to a professionally trained person who works in the field or who is associated with a 12-step program and has been through all this themselves, has a good recovery and understands what's really going on. Because I do need specialised help. And so getting that help that I need is very, very important at this point. So, that is the process of addiction and how the process of addiction and the addiction cycle function in us. And it doesn't matter what people are addicted to, they will all understand what I'm talking about. You know, the patterns may change from person to person or from addiction to addiction. However, the colours are the same. And so addressing the addiction cycle to break the cycle of addiction, these are the basic steps. I must admit that I'm powerless over the addiction. It's not a battle I'm going to win. And surrendering, getting help, and actively going in to a program where people are trained and qualified and able to help me. This is what is very, very important initially. And so I'm going to leave it there. And I'm just wondering if we have any questions. If you want to, I'll stop screen sharing though. That'll be a good start, won't it? Stop share. Okay. And Kel is with us. Kel, do you have any questions?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I don't really have any questions. I found that all really clear to understand. I'd like to have a copy of that sheet. Are you giving that out?
I can send that to you, most definitely.
Yeah, no, that was good. I've got pages of notes. So.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, thank you. I may have a question, but nothing that I thought I needed to ask. Sorry. Yeah.
Right now. So
question. No, yeah.
I covered it.
Yeah.
That's good. I also think, at this point, what I want to say is if you happen to be listening to this and you do realize that you have an addiction and you're feeling despairing and hopeless, just know that all you need to do is reach out and get the right kind of help. And when you do, things will improve. You don't have to live with these feelings, go on living with these feelings. Once you begin getting help, you are going to feel a whole lot better.
Okay, I have a question.
Okay.
I was just thinking with meditation and how that can help someone. And like you said, people have to come to their own decision in their own time, so no one can force that. But meditation's helped me with all of my addictions. How do you suggest to somebody that could help them too?
Well, I just, in my days of working in detox and rehab, I used to teach meditation to the clients as soon as they had detoxed. I mean, most detoxes don't take very long. 24 hours for most things, some a little longer, but even a benzodiazepine detox or an ice detox, which, can be longer, once the person is detoxed, meditate. It's a very good time to start meditating and to learn meditation. And I found people very, very receptive. The beautiful thing about learning to meditate when you have an addictive personality or an addictive inclination is that you're very used to changing your consciousness, and you will find you are very good at meditating. And that meditation fills the void. In fact, it will be the only thing that really, because it is a spiritual thing that we are doing, that it will fill the void very, very well over time. And, after a person detoxes, their brain chemistry starts to return to normal. It might take a little longer than the actual detox, but once the person's brain chemistry and brain activity start to return to normal, meditation, it just really can take the place of the drug or the substance, the process, whatever it is. And I've taught hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in early recovery to meditate. And what they have said to me in almost every instance is, this is the best drug I have ever come across. And when we let go of an addiction, we do need to fill that space with something better. It's very important. but it has to be something spiritual. And because, look, we all know that in the process of recovery, there'll be substitution is part of the recovery process. Lapsing and relapsing are part of the process. So I need to, the earlier I can get in there with meditation, that's actually going to enable me to take a lot of spiritual power on board, which is what I need. It's going to serve my recovery just so brilliantly. So I highly recommend it. Thank you for that question, Elle. It's a good question and a very important question to address. And so, you know, we do need to understand that while addiction has mental and emotional outcomes and effects, that it's also spiritual. It is, it's an issue of the will. The will gets completely hijacked by the addiction and becomes subservient to the addiction. And that's where all my life choices go wonky. But what working a structured program, getting good drug and alcohol counselling and meditation, what they all do for me is they do that spiritual repair work. Meditation is excellent because it fills up the spiritual void with what I really need, which is spiritual power. And so it repairs that invisible nerve between the mind and the will, so that the mind, instead of which has been completely hijacked by the addiction, you know, when you're in the depth of addiction, all you think about is getting the drug and getting on. That's all you think about. So the mind's been completely hijacked and the will has been completely hijacked. And so what meditation does, it repairs, does that spiritual repair work so that I can get, my mind can move into recovery and start to take in all this new information I'm being fed in whatever program I'm working, counselling, all these things that I'm doing. And meditation will give me the power that I need in moments of crisis, because everyone gets tested in recovery. Everyone. It's not possible to get a strong, good, long-term recovery without being tested again and again and again. And meditation will give me the power to really sail through those moments. And I know from dealing with my own recovery over, you know, cigarettes and various other things. And so we're just going to finish now with some silence. I'm going to share my screen again and bring up a picture that we can all look at. Oh, hello. This likes to bring up the wrong. Here we go. Oh. Now. Oh. Well, guess what? I'm not having much success here. I'm telling it to do one thing and it's doing another. So we're going to have one more go. No, the addiction cycle wants to keep coming up. So we'll just have some silence. And I'll just say a few words. So I move my mind into the innermost part of my being, into that space between feeling and thinking, into that silent space that pulls me. And I feel the pull away from the physical world into the stillness and peace of the soul within. And in this space, I am free. I am beyond my thoughts. And I understand that I am not my thoughts. I am not my feelings. I am separate. I am not my problems. I am not my addictions. I am a spiritual being of light. I am subtle. I am a being. That expresses myself through the body, but I am not this body. And when I separate from the physical identity and experience myself as a point of energy, of consciousness, the peace within fills me. and the light within glimmers and stirs from a spark. Where it can grow. And over time, when I continue to sit in the awareness of myself as a soul, as a spiritual being, the practice of meditation makes me a radiant being. Over time. This is the inner light that draws me back to itself. Shining lights where there was darkness. Bringing hope where there has been pain. And bringing fulfillment where there has been emptiness and lostness. And I feel my own strength growing day by day. And the beauty of life returns. Fear dissipates and recedes, and I become strong. And whole. Om Shanti. So, thank you very much for being with us. And I am now going to say good evening to you. It was wonderful to have you here. And I'll be back next week. Bye for now.